wouldn't
Sure.
you say like women are inflexible if they're like not letting, not like a guy has to choose between a relationship and like a riskier career? Like,
Sure,
wouldn't like
sure.
you
Yeah.
say women are
Yeah.
inflexible?
Yeah. So, yeah, this is actually an interesting one, right?
Hello guys, welcome to Aur Batao. Today we'll talk about how to find your spouse through online platforms. At Aur Batao we discuss about things that are not taught at school but are useful, and finding your spouse is one of the biggest decisions we'll take. As some of you already know that I recently got married, and I think the search was quite a complicated process. First of all, like there's so many profiles, there's so many filters which didn't make sense to me. You won't get any understanding about the person through the profile. Another problem I faced was how to present my own profile. I don't know. I didn't know like what would attract the right people. Thirdly, if you start talking to someone, then there can be communication gaps. One person might not open up so much, so there can be a lot of time wasted. So I felt a sort of divide between what I was looking for and what the online platforms had to offer in the vanilla form. As I was exploring more, I saw a website by the name of Marriage Broker Auntie and found it quite interesting. I got a call set up with them, and we discussed on quite a few questions like what are the must-haves, what are deal breakers. There are a fair number of other questions also. Overall, I felt that it was a step ahead of what I would find on any traditional matrimonial website. Really liked about the whole exercise, and it made me think in a fairly methodical, logical, structural way to go about my search. Later on, I found that this journey of the founder of Marriage Broker Auntie, Ms. Priyanka Bharadwaj, is also quite interesting. She did her MBA, worked with Toyota, Amazon, and now coaches people to find the right match. So without wasting any more time, let me introduce to you our guest for the evening, Ms. Priyanka Bharadwaj. Hello, Priyanka.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi. Thanks, guys. Hey, first
So,
of all, I had no idea. Congratulations, Ayush. I didn't know you got married recently.
thank you. Thank you so much. So firstly, can you just tell us about your journey? How did you went to Big Corp and then you went into setting up marriages or
Sure.
helping people marriage. So there's a
Sure.
big jump.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't quite make the jump until much later on. I started Marriage Broker Auntie way back in 2013 when I was still working with Toyota. I happened to set up a couple friends of mine, colleagues who ended up getting married, and I thought it was a fun sort of idea to expand my sort of services at that point of time, which I thought it was a fun idea. So that's why I thought I'll set up a page on Facebook and get friends of friends together, like-minded people together, and through my own network, sort of help people out. So I started off as a matchmaker, but over the years of sort of working with people, I just realized that there are a lot of platforms, as you mentioned, matrimonial websites, as well as dating apps where people can actually meet other people, right? Like, in fact, there is this whole illusion of infinite choice nowadays because of the way these apps are designed. So I felt the real value was being able to help people figure out as to how to choose a partner on these existing platforms. So that was the point of time way back in 2016 when I pivoted to mentoring people or coaching people make this decision independently without having to rely on their parents or feeling confident that they can take this decision on their own. So since then I've mostly been an advisory service, but it was only last year that I quit my sort of full-time job to do this because I felt like I was really enjoying this and I wanted to give this more time to see what I could make of it. So yeah, I quit my job with Amazon to do this for a while to see what I can do with it. So yeah, it's been 7.5 years now.
Okay, so before we get into the nuances of marriage setup, really, can you tell us like what do you really do? Like, what is the value add that you provide as a advisor or as a coach?
Sure. So I can give you a few examples. Typically the kind of people who come to me and the sort of problems that I work with, right? There are some people who come to me after having been in a really, really long relationship. and ended that relationship, and now they're sort of in this place where parents want them to get married, or even they realize the value of getting married, but then they're really struggling to make this decision because they haven't really processed their previous relationship, and they keep comparing everybody that they meet to an ex, and they don't really know what to do with that information, right? Like no one's good enough, and you keep thinking back to this previous relationship that you have to move on from, but you're unable to move on. So that's one type of clientele that I get. The other type of people are people who've had a very sort of sheltered upbringing, have lived with their parents most of the time, or haven't really lived independently and are unable to think independently, but they know that they think differently from their parents. So I enable them to sort of make this decision independently. And the way I do this is to sort of help them realize how to set boundaries, right? Like how to realize who they really are outside of their family, and to sort of lay those boundaries so that they feel confident that they can do this on their own, and also to help create some aspirations for them in terms of relationships and what they can offer. So that gives them some more confidence to go out there. The other type of clientele that I get are very, very busy sort of professionals who don't have the time to sort of go through this process of coordinating with parents, getting them to do this, or sort of doing this on their own. So we work through like power sessions where we go through what are the basics that they just need to do to be able to actually meet interesting people, and from then on they're on their own because they know how to make choices and so on. They just need to figure out what's the best way for them given their situation. So these are broadly the type of people that I work with, and it's just, think of it more like a strategy consulting, not for companies but for successful individuals for their sort of life ahead.
Pratap, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so like one question is a bit so like I meet a lot of people who are like I don't know if romantic is the word. So basically they don't want to get married through Shaadi.com. Like basically
Sure.
they're like, no, I want to meet somebody, fall in love, like you get married once. Do you get people like that? And basically, what is your opinion of somebody who's in that kind of mindset?
Yeah, that's pretty much everybody who comes to me, right? Like we are, thanks to Bollywood and everything else, we're conditioned to believe that at college or after college, everybody has to fall in love. That's just how life works, right? Like there'll be this moment where you'll realize that you've seen the love of your life, and the rest of it is happily ever after, right? So we're so conditioned to believe that it happens that way. Everyone wants to have a love marriage, right? It's only after that doesn't work out that people come to you and they're like, oh my God, I'm 30 now. Like it hasn't happened even now. Like, what do I do? Like, I'm freaking out, right? That's pretty much everybody. And arranged marriage is almost like the last sort of resort, or like going on these apps is like the last resort. And coming to me is like even beyond that. Like if being on these apps or websites doesn't work out and they're struggling to find somebody, they come to me after that. So most of the time it's only people after 27 or 28 who come to me, like nobody before that.
Achha, I have a follow-up question on that. So
Sure.
I understand like people want to live fantasies and like that totally makes sense. But in terms of what you get out of it, like, is it true that like maybe love marriages are like you're better off if you get love marriage? So it's just like if you're unlucky, then you get here. I mean, you have to make peace with it and move on. Or is it not like that? Because I keep on hearing other sides of people arguing as well that in an arranged marriage you can actually think about compatibility and you have a wider area to find somebody versus like the friends that I have is Ayush was in my class in school, like other friends are like they just happen to be in my hostel. So people are like that I meet are just by chance. So do you have any views on that?
So obviously I don't have any like professional advice about this because I don't work with a lot of married couples, but just based on my experience of having worked with single people and still sort of staying connected to them after they get married, my view is it doesn't matter. Like it's just the way that you discover your partner, right? Like one is facilitated through family or an app or whatever, and one just happens, right? It's just a method of discovery. I feel like irrespective of whether it's a love marriage or arranged marriage, like after a while, all marriages sort of stabilize into certain types of equilibrium. Like it really doesn't matter. But if you're asking about the sort of choice that you have before you get married, well, when you compare love and arrange, obviously, right? Like arrange, it's like platter. It's like pick what you want, right? Love is, you only have so much time to invest in each person, and like you're doing it one at a time. Whereas arranged marriages, it's like, there are 10 people, pick who you want kind of thing, right?
But speaking of that, don't you think that there is a negative perception? So, for example, like take from a generational point of view. So, like caste marriages or things like these have diluted. Uh, People don't, like our generation don't look at the, arranged marriages the same way as a previous generation looks at. Now there are a lot of like cliches also coming. So like this Netflix show that came on arranged marriages, I forgot. It's Indian matchmaking.
Indian match.
Sure.
Negative sentiments also against arranged marriages. So are people still like very keen on them, like given the like sort of the narrative that goes around with it?
Yeah, I think ideally, as I said, ideally everyone would like to sort of fall in love, right? And get married to that person and spend the rest of their life. But if that doesn't happen and you still want to be married, you don't have a choice, right? Like you just need to have an arranged marriage. But it is true, the way this is designed, like arranged marriage versus love marriage, is quite different, right? Like arranged marriages make you think in a certain manner. It makes you think in terms of attributes, and you almost use your brain a lot more than your heart initially, right? Like to filter through people. Whereas love marriages, you're not thinking so much about, like, there is no intention that you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody at the point where you're getting to know someone, right? The pressure is a lot lesser. The expectations are not there. Everyone is kind of being themselves. In that sense, it's quite different. And maybe that's why people don't prefer arranged marriages, because it's hard for them to not only be themselves, but also trust that the other party is being themselves. So there's an issue of trust with arranged marriages nowadays that makes people feel like it's not a very authentic sort of experience. And also there's a lot of parental involvement, right? Like, so you go meet somebody and come back and your parents are like, hey, can I book the Kalyan Mandap like the next day, right? Like it's like you want them to back off. You want to figure it out at your own pace, right? If you ask my personal opinion, is that finding a partner is like less than 1% of your relationship journey. It's what you make of it, right? Like once you commit to a relationship and what you make of that relationship is a much bigger part of this journey compared to how you find your partner, right? So sometimes when people are so hung up on how they find their partner or like what they want in a partner, I'm like, relax, it's okay. Like when you look back 10 years from now, you won't even remember how you tried to find your partner or like what you felt at that point of time, because there is so much more to do, right? So I don't think there's a difference at all between love or arranged marriage. Like there are pros and cons for both.
So if we go onto the process of like actual selecting the profiles or selecting the person or filtering them, then what is your take on like how should the process be? How should an individual go about doing?
Yeah. So the approach that I take is, first of all, it's very important for you to know who you are and what your relationship values are, or the type of relationship you want to build, right? This is irrespective of the individual you're going to end up with, because at the end of the day, you can only control your behavior or your reactions to a certain situation. You cannot control what another individual does. So when I ask people, hey, tell me, imagine you're like in this sort of really comfortable, positive, nourishing relationship. What does that look like to you? Like, can you describe that to me? And they start saying, okay, yeah, I need the guy to be sort of really honest. I need him to have like a stable job. I need her to be like sort of okay with my family. I'm like, no, I'm asking you about the relationship, not about the other person. So when you're saying something, if you want to say you want the person to be honest, say, I want our relationship to be based on honesty. Can you offer honesty? like in return for the honesty that you get. So talk to me about the relationship itself. So I really sort of force people to think about what they want in a relationship, and then get them to translate that into possible personas of people who bring those values, right? um, who do you think can be honest? What kind of background would they have? What kind of experiences would they have? And things like that, right? So I basically help them build their criteria based on what they want and who they are, as opposed to what is good to have.
So I have a question on that. So
Sure.
like think about it in terms of like as an individual, you don't know anything about the other individual. And like society has set up these benchmarks, IIT, IIM, IS or whatever, like some of these
Yeah.
benchmarks, and they
Yeah.
define success in certain magnitudes. And even if you go around doing a correlation, those people will at least be financially more secure than say the rest of the population. So how is this a wrong way of going about? I mean, it's a data wise, it's a good way of like at least not getting it wrong.
Yeah, you said it right. There is a strong correlation, but it shouldn't be confused for a causation, right? Like just because you went to IIT does not mean you will be financially stable forever, right? Um, I don't so much have a problem with like people, wanting these things, right? It's much more about how you structure what you want and being able to feel a sense of control over what you want, right? So you might say, hey, I want somebody who's doing professionally really well, or I want a girl who is super fit and, takes care of her body and stuff like that. You can't control these things. She'll lose shape after you get married. He loses job after he gets married. Like, you can't control these things. You can only control the interaction that you will have, the way you will behave with your partner, and the kind of values your partner should bring into the relationship, so that you can preserve the nature of your relationship, right? And grow from there.
I have a question on that. So like if we think in that framework, like I think everybody would kind of want the same thing, like honesty, respect, love. I guess like wouldn't that be the case then? Like
Yeah, mostly very like largely the way, if you look at it like in terms of genders, and I don't want to stereotype, but I have noticed a strong distinction in terms of the kind of things women tell me and the kind of things men tell me, and they're pretty much the same, right? It only varies in like 1 or 2 points, and it really is a function of the kind of upbringing they've had, the kind of relationship their parents had, the kind of past experiences they've had. That influences 1 or 2 points. Like, for example, if someone's being cheated on, and they'll come and say, for me, loyalty is the most important thing, right? Or if their parents had a very abusive relationship, someone will come and say, I want the person to, not be aggressive or abusive. So that's why you'll notice a difference, but largely the, points that people say are pretty much the same, but it's about understanding that, right? We all want very basic things from a relationship. And at the end of the day, all relationships sort of narrow down into these few sort of types of relationships.
would you like to talk about what these traits are? Like and you also mentioned that there are different traits what men look for and what women look
Yeah.
for. Would you like to like name top three, or like what are the most
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, this is based off of my experience. I don't want to generalize for the whole gender. This is the type of men and women that I get to see, as a part of my practice. Women largely want to be with people, with partners who appreciate their sort of individuality and give them space, while also making the effort to build a meaningful relationship. They like that you're two separate identities, but you're building a common identity together, right? Like, space and independence is something that women value a lot, and it's number one for most women that I speak to, right? Men, on the other hand, like there are like pretty much couple of things that they look for, right? Like, they want women who are, I wouldn't say good looking, but confident about how they look. It could be in terms of sort of being fit. It could be in terms of how they look, or like, something about physical appeal, right? Like, that matters a lot to men. And the other thing that matters to men is like niceness, right? Like is the woman nice? Is she willing to make things work, or is she? I feel like a lot of people are scared about like feminists because they don't know what to expect. A lot of men like don't directly say it, but they're like, I respect women and, I respect equal relationships, but I don't want like a fighter cock.
Do you find that a common trait even today, like not allowing women to work freely or like these things?
It's not about not allowing women to work. Like, men encourage women to work. In fact, they want women to work, and there are a lot of women who want women to have careers and be successful at their careers. They just don't know how to handle it because they've come from families where mums were either not working, or even if they were working, they were going over the top, managing both work and home. They haven't really seen marriages that were equal in all senses, right?
Like, so basically
mums,
so I talking about like what I call like Abhiman complex. So they want women to be successful, but not more successful than they are. That makes them insecure. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's one of it. And also they don't know how to support women who are successful, right? Like, and I don't blame men, right? Like, I don't blame men because unfortunately, even today, I can tell you that women enjoy sort of being able to manage everything. And, if we're able to manage everything, we're not going to complain. And so if children in our house grow up watching that women are taking much more like workload at home, you don't really realize that you need to support your wife when you grow up.
Can you just elaborate on like what exactly is needed? Like you said that men don't have a problem with women working exactly.
Yeah.
Then like they're helpful in that. So what is that support missing really? What is the like, exact thing missing?
I will give you a very nuanced example, right? Like to tell you the disparity of how men and women think in this situation. And this is based on conversations that I've just had, like, earlier this week with a few clients. At 30 or 31, most women have sort of figured out where their career is headed. They have some plan. They're sort of, settled. They know they're working towards it, or they know where they want to be, right? They're a bit sure. Like a lot of women, like let's say they're in Bangalore or there's some other place, they're like, okay, this is where my career is and I'm going to work here because things are going good for me, right? I don't know if it's because they know that they have to get married at some point, so they need to like settle down before that or whatever. Men, on the other hand, at that age, don't have that pressure, right? So a lot of men haven't, at 30 or 31, haven't really figured out what they want to do with their careers, right? It's very fluid. They don't know whether they want to be here. They don't know whether they want to study and move elsewhere, etc. So they feel that women are being quite picky about not wanting to move from where they are.
Okay. I want to talk this about a little more on these choices that some people, you're talking about people who have not figured out what they're doing, but a very close by thing is people who have taken some riskier paths and like maybe are doing some startups or something like that. And then they are like sort of less, like they're the second choice really. Like people would rather choose somebody working at Microsoft, Google, but they would not like a person who is just dropped out of their and working on something cool and it might take some years. And they are at the lower pile really.
Yeah.
What is your take on them? Is it a safe bet that they are being like downgraded, or or you think that's a wrong choice? That's
I'll also add to that. Wouldn't you say like women are inflexible if they're like not letting like in order to like a guy has to choose between a relationship and like a riskier career. Like, say women are inflexible.
Yeah. So this is actually an interesting one, right? We're a lot of times I meet a lot of people who are feminists and all about gender equality and all those things. They want women to sort of like men to support at home and all of that, but they're less accepting of men who don't fit into that traditional mold of a stable career, right? Like social conditioning, just like how men have social conditioning in terms of what women bring to the table, women also are conditioned to believe that husband is stable income, husband is like stable career, right?
So in terms of like there is in India there is, you've talked about this I think multiple times now, that people are coming from smaller backgrounds, small towns, and really, so there is this divide. There's this huge population which was really living in like smaller cities. So they come from like backgrounds which are not very open, and now they've moved to like metro cities where like the culture is much more Americanized, and there is a lot of more individualism. So back home, their family is still conservative, but they themselves are much more liberal. So what is the choice for these individuals really? Because you can't just like, you still want to take care of your parents. You have that attachment.
Yeah.
At the same time, you also want to keep your freedom and your. So what would you give them the advice? Like, how should they go about it?
See, if they're sort of meeting similar individuals, right? Like who have very sort of similar backgrounds, like, grown up in smaller towns and, now living in metro cities or whatever, they're much more likely to sort of understand your situation and your responsibilities and your lifestyle and everything. So you won't really, like, they don't really need advice at this point of time, right? Sometimes the problem is these people who come from smaller towns, but then, having lived in metro cities, their whole worldview and the way they think about things is quite different. And they feel this huge disconnect with their families. So that's when they're trying to seek out cooler individuals who are born and brought up in cities, who may or may not understand where you come from and what your life is like, back home and your responsibilities, everything. That's where the challenge is sometimes, and they really struggle, because if you are somebody who has grown up in a city, you are also seeking another individual who has had a similar sort of worldview as you, right? Like, it's easier for you to relate to them and so on. So when you come from a different background, like, my advice is, if you are different, you should work on pitching how you're different, and sort of if that's really what you want, right? You want like somebody from a tier 1 city, etc., who's had a very different childhood compared to you. You've got to convince this person that you understand where they come from, if that's really what you want. But the real question is, what do you really want, and what is helpful for you to have a sort of meaningful relationship? Does that make sense? I'm sort of trying to answer.
Yes, I'm actually very interested in what you just said. So, so we were just talking about this before the call, that so Bharat Matrimony has divided its website into Punjabi matrimony and Banya matrimony and Hindi matrimony.
Yeah.
So basically, they've assumed that the similar background argument, right? So I'm Punjabi, I've grown up eating Rajma Chawal, so I would love if somebody can appreciate that. But none of my friends, like, other than some of them, are Punjabi. So like, I have bonded with people who are not like that also. So my question to you is, if you go like looking from rain, like, does these things also matter? Like, so I understand the small city, big city argument, that makes sense to me. But do my culture, do my religion, like all those things, should caste, like all those things, you think there is merit to looking within these things, these attributes as well?
So I don't know about caste, religion, etc., but I'm going to talk about Rajma Chawal. It does matter if they like Rajma Chawal, because living with your friends every single day, asking them what they want to eat for dinner, or them asking you what you want to eat for lunch, coordinating the cooking, you will appreciate someone who eats like you, right? Because that's what you deal with every day, right? So when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to marry a Marwadi, and, I'm Jain, I'm vegetarian, I'm like, dude, you're vegetarian, and that's what matters to you. Whether you're Marwadi or Banya really doesn't matter, right? Food, discussing about food every day matters every day, and that's what your focus should be. So what I try to do is, I try to understand what is behind that caste filter. Like, why do you need that caste filter? Like, some people say, oh, listen, I'm going to stay with my parents. My parents are crazy. So, like, I want somebody who will get along with them. Okay, fair enough. Like, I get it, right? But if it's something like, oh no, I'm vegetarian, that's why I want someone vegetarian, it doesn't matter. You can marry any vegetarian sort of caste person, right? So I try to understand the rationale and then get them to sort of either drop that filter or keep that filter, because at the end of the day, it's your preference, like your choice, right? Like, I don't try to say, oh, I'm against caste-based marriages or any such thing, right? Like, I'm just helping you figure out what's important to you and what you will respect for the next 30, 40 years of your life.
I actually have a question. So I really like this discussion around like the match part. Basically, we've
Sure.
spoken about. I actually want to talk about the next steps in the logistic, which is actually okay. I like somebody, so we initiate a chat, and I've seen these platforms. They are ridiculous. I mean, like not only it's bad tech, but there are lot of different people. Some accounts are being operated by parents. Like some like there's some guys whose profiles is being run by their parents and they don't even know, and it's only
Oh
later
yeah.
they discover that they are on these platforms and they get
Yeah.
messages from
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I just want to ask you like what is a so like if I talk to some girls like what should be what is a good conversation, because this is also very different from a dating setting. I mean, you're kind of evaluating long term, so like would you like to give any tips?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Maybe I'll answer it like in parts, right? Like, so what you should normally do is, or the recommended, like what I recommend is that two individuals talk to each other first before involving families or horoscopes or any such crazy filter, because honestly, it's very difficult to find a partner, right? If you want to add like more artificial filters, like be my guest, like you're not sort of winning this game at all. So the idea is two individuals talk to each other. So if you see that somebody's parents are running their profile, so on, you sort of say, hey, you know, I would like to talk to the daughter or the son, and you know, I would like to like speak directly before involving the parents, and I hope that's okay. If they're also cool like you, they'll say, okay, great, you know, here's my son or daughter's number, like carry on, like if things work out, we'll talk. Which is cool, right? If somebody says, oh no, parents have to meet and like our statuses have to match first and all of that, you're like, okay, cool. You know, you self eliminate yourself, which is great. But it really depends on who you want. Like most of the clients who come to me are people who want to do this independently, right? Then once you've sort of had an opportunity to sort of get the contact number, you initiate a simple text conversation, casual exchanges. If you're in the same city, you plan to meet, right? Typically what happens if both parties are equally invested in trying to sort of get to a decision, get married in like a 1 year time frame, you will try to meet a few times, 2-3 times, before you either know it's a maybe, I still need to get to know this person, or no, right? It's never a yes. You won't get to a yes like ever, like not soon enough. So initially the conversations are very casual. It's like, you know, what did you eat for lunch? Like, you know, what are your weekend plans? Like boring stuff, right? Then when you meet, like it goes to like a little bit more serious stuff. I know a lot of people who don't talk about anything serious. Like they meet 2-3 times, 4 times, and they just keep talking about the weather or like, you know, stuff that doesn't matter. You get nowhere with it. Like you've got, like the whole point is about taking a calculated risk in terms of who you want to spend the rest of your life with. So talk about the important stuff. What I tell people is you identify like 4-5 things that you want in a relationship. Try to find ways to figure out if the other party also you know values the same things or is trying to build a similar relationship, right? That's what you have to evaluate. And if you do not evaluate in the first 3 meetings, you're never going to evaluate this.
So something around there, like so a lot of people like marry cross country, so
Yeah.
working maybe in US
Yeah.
or Australia
Yeah.
or Canada, and so meeting so many times is not always possible.
Sure.
Especially in this COVID times now, even traveling is not
Yeah.
really possible. What would be your advice to such people?
So I will tell you that my advice right now is not proven and tested because of COVID. A lot of people are struggling right now. Like it's really hard to make this decision, right? Like you've never met, and like a lot of people are like, oh, I need to physically meet this person. How will I know if I'm attracted to this person or not? So what I normally tell people is, you know, try to do as many sort of video calls as possible. Find out everything you need to know before you meet this person, right? Like whatever you can find out through conversation, please find out. Invest your time in getting to know somebody so that you can move the maybe closer to a yes, and you can hold on to the yes decision whenever you meet this person, right? Uh, But what happens oftentimes, like you're talking to 20 people at the same time, and like you don't invest your energy into anyone, and most of the time it fizzles out. Like this COVID has been an exceptionally sort of bad time.
But not just COVID. I mean, actually, I meant like where traveling is not so easy. So if you're traveling only once a year to say India, and like you can only meet once, then you can't really wait like 1 year again to meet again. So,
no, I think if you are invested and if you feel like this is going somewhere and you really honestly want to give it a chance, I would recommend people that you actually fly to wherever. I've had clients who've sort of flown from across the world and met like at midpoint so that they can figure this out. I mean, it's once in your life, right? You're not going to do this every month. So yeah, you should invest that time and energy and money and whatever else.
I just had one more question with regarding this point itself. So you said that have a lot of conversation. Is there any potential of really, bad behavior in the sense that the information you get is completely wrong? Like, how do you judge that? Like, because that can be a complete game changer because you expected something and eventually after marriage you find something completely different. Like a basis like on which one person really believes very concretely. If that fluctuates, then how do you handle or manage this situation?
Yeah, it's really difficult. It happens in various forms in all marriages, right? And I mean, touch wood, hope it doesn't happen with yours, but I'm just saying there will be moments where you feel like you knew this person before you got married. Even with love marriages, it happens, right? Like where you feel like you know this person so well and they suddenly don't cooperate with you about something, or like, they're not on your side, right? When you evaluate somebody on sort of dynamic attributes that can sort of change over time, the kind of job they do or the kind of lifestyle they have and things like that, these are things that are dynamic and you know this beforehand. So I always encourage people to focus on the nature of a relationship. And like, I'll give you an example. I don't know how to articulate this very well, but like I'll give you an example, right? You are going to have conflicts as a couple. So I always encourage people to understand the other person's conflict resolution style and explain your conflict resolution style to them so that you know how you're going to deal with conflicts. Okay, if these two individuals that you're talking about, this couple that you're talking about, if they had agreed on how they would resolve conflicts, or they were confident of resolving conflicts with each other because they understood each other's style, no matter what that situation is, they will get through it, right? So it's really important for you to know that, and these are the values that people bring into a relationship, right? It's not so much about what you do as an individual and what the other person believes as an individual. It's about how you want to build the relationship.
I have one last question. So
Sure.
This is related to this meeting 20 people at once thing. So earlier, like, I think like one thing that stands out in love marriages also the marriages, not like love marriages through dating. Love marriages isn't like we were in the same office, we studied together.
Yeah.
Is I've seen somebody in their natural environment. I like really know who they are.
Yeah.
But like it's so easy to pretend, and I've seen like everybody pretends to portray a certain image. Like you tell the same stories to everybody.
Yeah.
So how do you like, compare the signal and the noise? Like how do you decipher that?
It's very difficult, right? I mean, I'm guilty of doing that too. Like I told my husband that I was a cooking contest champion, but like it's only later that I told him I just peeled the vegetables. So I mean, it's really hard. Like, but at the end of the day, you have to remember that you are taking a sort of calculated risk. So you have to sort of try and simulate as many sort of realistic situations as possible, right? Normally what I tell people is, in terms of when you want to find out if the other person is empathetic, you don't go and ask them, hey, are you empathetic? Yeah, sure, they'll tell you they're empathetic, right? Try to ask them questions about their own lives. Try to learn about incidents from their own lives, because people like talking about themselves. Try to ask them more questions to try and understand how they think, right? Breaking that down will help you understand, are they empathetic? Do they treat people with respect? Do they treat their parents with respect? What is their opinion about their parents? What were their parents' relationship like, right? Like, because especially if you're talking over video, because you're in different cities and so on, instead of talking about each other's lunch every day, you could talk about so many different things. So try to find out like what drives people, how they behave, like, you know, how they make decisions and so on, because that'll help you sort of simulate as many realistic situations as possible while people are still talking about themselves, right? They're not trying to pretend to be somebody.
Priyanka, just one last question. Any person like looking to get married or like to a community, what would be your message? Like late 20s, early 30s guys or girls, really? What would be your message?
I would say start thinking about this when this thought has been seeded in your head by your parents. You know, I know a lot of times people are not serious about this when their parents tell them and they want their parents to back off. It's only after, you know, 3 or 4 years that they say, oh, okay, maybe I need to take this seriously, because parents are like, you know what, enough, you know, I'm not doing this for you. I don't understand what you want. You keep saying no to everybody. You deal with it yourself. Don't wait till that point, right? It is your life. So take control of your life. Your parents don't have to do anything for you. In fact, they're supporting you. And if you can use their support to sort of filter through the noise. But the earlier you start, the larger your pool, the easier it is for you to find what you want.
Right. Thanks, Priyanka. Pratat, sir, any parting thoughts?
So thanks, Priyanka, for joining us. And it was very interesting and like very insightful conversation in a lot of different areas. And if you'd like to talk about your organization a bit, like that would also be useful. Like we can put it at the end.
Cool. Yeah. My website's called marriagebrokeranti.com. That's marriagebrokerantie.com. If you'd like to visit, you know, the website, please do so. You can book a session with me. I do a 60-minute video call with people to help them sort of figure out where they are in their process and why they're feeling stuck, if they're feeling stuck, and help them sort of unlock with like simple sort of hacks, which are very much customized to their situation. And yeah, I post a lot of free content on YouTube, and I have a newsletter as well. So follow if you like. The newsletter is called Shapely Gal. It's shapelygal.substack.com. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thanks, Priyanka.
Awesome.
Great
Thanks, guys.
conversation.
It was a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.